Hi, I'm George the Antique Nomad. Come with me as I wander the country in search of valuable vintage, amazing antiques, and cool collectibles. We'll buy, sell, and trade at antique malls, shops, and shows, estate sales, flea markets, thrift stores, anywhere people go to find really interesting things that just aren't made anymore. So come on, let's go! Welcome viewers, I'm George the Antique Nomad. It is great to be back with you. This is the bonus video for the month of February 2022. I'm so glad that you're watching. If you are seeing this when it first drops, that means you're a level 2 member and we appreciate your membership very much. That's what helps us do these extra bonus videos. If you are a level 2 member, you will be seeing the items that I am showing listing live on eBay as you watch. If you're seeing this after the fact, some of these items might still be on eBay if they haven't sold, and you will see links in the description. If you can go right to them and see a little bit more detail about the items. If you're interested, you can bid. If you're a reseller looking for information, you can follow along and see what they go for. I like to do this as an experiment to see what the current auction prices on eBay for these types of items are. I do all of these as auctions. Some of them will have a buy it now price as well. And the reason I do that is because it's a snapshot and a point of time as to what the market currently is offering for these types of things. And with no further ado, we'll get started because I'm one item short this month, so we're going to have 19 different items that you will get to hear a little bit extra about. I like being able to explain things in a little more depth and talk about why they came to be, and I hope you have fun. So here we go. The first item up is this pin, and let me show you up close where you can really see it. This is by a company called Swoboda, and if you look at those leaves, you'll notice those are carved jade, and it's also carved stones for the little grapes there. Grape leaf pins are one of the things Swoboda is known for, and they typically put a good mark on the back. You can see the Swoboda ink mark there. A lot of people overlook these, but these actually sell for pretty good money online, and part of the reason is because they use natural stones. And the reason for that is that Edward Swoboda, who was the founder of this company back in 1958, was a mineral dealer in Los Angeles. And he got a bad batch of beryl and tourmaline and didn't really know what to do with it because it wasn't as good quality as he was used to selling to his mineral buyers. So he developed the electric rock tumbler, and his electric rock tumbler actually became a staple in home lapidary shops for the next 20 or 30 years. It became quite a hobby that a lot of people took up, but he turned it into a real business. And so he started with the beryl and tourmaline, turned it into costume jewelry that was a little bit better than regular costume jewelry because it's using natural stones. And it really took off. People liked the fact that it was better quality than just some sort of an inexpensive rhinestone setting. And the settings are really good. You can see that things are set very deeply. The carving is nice. The polishing is good. And eventually he got into jade, as you see here, and was very successful with this. These were made throughout the late 50s through the 1970s until he retired. So Swoboda is a name that we see it all over the country. I got this one in Florida, even though it's a West Coast manufacturing. It ended up taking off all over the place. And I expect that this will probably sell somewhere in the $35 to $50 range. It's about 1.5 inches in size. So we will list it on eBay now and see how it does. Our next piece will be familiar to most of you. It is this piece here, and if you think, gee, it looks an awful lot like a Hummel child, well, you're right. They did a boy and a girl of these. And this one's fairly early in their production because if you look on the back, you will see what they call the full B mark. See the B floating above the V there, and the fact that it's a full picture of a V, it's not stylized, it's not crunched down into the V, means this piece would have been made between about 1950 and 1956. You'll also see that it says M.I. Hummel on it. Maria Innocentia Hummel was the person who designed these, And she was motivated by the fact that things were difficult during the Depression. In 1935, she used the skills that she had gotten going to a very prestigious Munich art university to develop this line of very cute cherubic children, and that's where Hummel Figurines came from. Goebel was a ceramic company in Germany at the time, and they decided that since they had started doing earthenware as well as porcelain, that the earthenware would be better for these because it would give a softer painting and a softer glaze. And in fact, the early pieces, and this is why the full B mark is important, they always sell for a premium over the later signatures because they are indeed a little softer and a little better quality. The pieces will always have her name on it, the Hummel name, unless they are too small to have it. Hummel actually means bumblebee in Germany, and that is part of the reason that she liked designing these with the bees on them. And they're very cute. Like I said, there is a boy and a girl. This one is the boy, of course, and this one is going to sell in all likelihood in the range of $45 to $50 because it is the earlier mark. So we will send this off to Auctionland and see what the market is currently for these. But it is different than some of the other Goebel designs. Maria Hummel did not design all of these. She died in 1946, so anything after 1946 that was released was done based on her drawings but was not designed by her. And she did not design all of Goebel's lines by any stretch of the imagination. They had a lot of other designers too. We'll show another piece shortly that you will see that is by a different designer. Next up we have this very pretty picture, and you'll notice that it has sort of an Art Deco feel. The colors sort of are reminiscent of Fiesta, but it's different. Look at the flower up in the handle. Look at the ribbing and the scalloping on the sides. This is a pattern called Vistosa, and it was by Taylor Smith Taylor. Now, Taylor Smith Taylor is best known amongst collectors of mid-century American dinnerware for its boutonniere pattern with the carnations and for Luray pastels, which were probably the most popular thing they ever did. But the Vistosa, which was in Fiesta-style colors, was a little different from the Luray line. It had a little more style, and that's why it was very popular at the time, but it cost a little more, and so you see a lot more of the Luray, which was rather plain by comparison. Vistosa is very collectible now because of that. People really like the colors, they like the shapes, but it was not in production for nearly as long as Luray, and so this picture in good condition typically sells for around $75, and this one seems to be flawless. I don't think it was ever really used much. It doesn't have any scrapes or scratches or marks of any sort on it, and so I think that it's a very attractive piece. I think someone will be glad to have it in their house. Some people just decorate with these, but you certainly can use them for cold or room temperature beverages, and if you're going to put something hot in it, just put warm water in it first so that it can expand a little bit so that you don't shock it, because that is a way that you can crack those types of 1930s and 40s earthenware. I wanted to show this piece next because it's got a good Murano label on it, and it's not a very old piece as these things go. It might just be Etsy vintage, meaning about 20 years old, but you can see the label. This is a blossom holder, and so it's shaped like a flower, and the idea was if you wanted, you could put a little water in it and have a flower coming out as the stamen. This one's nice because it has its original tag, and this one is from the Cristalleria Arzanze in Murano in Italy. Now, Murano Glass, the reason I wanted to show this piece and put it out is partly because it's very pretty, and again, I think it's a $30 or $35 piece typically these days on eBay. But I also wanted to show this because I wanted you to see the label, and because I wanted to talk a little bit about what's happening with Murano Glass right now. Murano Glass is so popular in the marketplace right now that there are a lot of things starting to be passed off as Murano that are not. And since this is a fairly recent piece, I thought this would be a good one to show you so that you see something that is genuinely from the island of Murano. A lot of the glassmakers in Venice are not on the island of Murano, but they know Murano is popular, so they're putting Murano tags on things that are not made on the island. And I've even seen unscrupulous dealers putting Murano tags on things that are from Eastern Europe and even from Asia. So I'm saying this in part as a warning. If you are going to collect Murano glass, you really should do a little research first and make sure that you can verify that the piece you're buying is indeed Murano glass, because a whole lot of eBayers are passing things off unknowingly, thinking that they're selling Murano because it has a Murano label on it. That is no guarantee anymore that it is actually a Murano piece. So do your research, find out what it should look like. Older pieces of Murano are finished in a way that's different than newer pieces, so that can be a clue. If it feels greasy and slick like newer glass, it could be Murano, it could be elsewhere. So that's when you really should be suspicious and start doing a little more research. This one, because it's got the tags and everything, we know where it came from, and it is indeed genuine. And I think it's very pretty. It's got a nice opalescence to it. You can see the fire in it, and you can see it more from my angle than yours. But it's got good color, it's a good design, and I think that this one should do well because we know that it is the real deal. Next up, we're going to go back in time a little farther. These are genuinely antique, and I'm going to hold them up and first of all let you ponder them for a moment and see if you can identify what they are while we get them into focus there. You see the big American eagles there, and they are round. They're referred to as ROndelles. But if you see the back, it's got a big screw in it. These were made as curtain tiebacks. So these would actually screw into your wall in the old days when people had lath and plaster walls and it was hard to drill things without cracking the walls. Well, you didn't have to drill these. You just pushed them into the wall and turned them, and they screwed right into the wall. And you would put them on either side of the window to hold back your draperies. The fact that these have the eagle with the flag is indicative of the fact that these were made around the time of the Spanish-American War. When the war broke out in 1898, there was a huge surge in production of products that had eagles and flags and patriotic emblems of all sorts. And so that's the reason these have these. The piece is done where it is an image done under glass. So you can see that the top is glass and that the inside is where the image is, probably on a printed planchet, I would think. These don't appear to be hand painted to me from what I can tell. The number of stars in the flag is going to not be indicative of their time. I believe we had 45 states in the Union when the Spanish-American War took place, and this certainly doesn't have as many as that, so it's trying to be old-fashioned even for its time. But they are very collectible now. Sets like this can sell for as much as $50 to $75 each just for a pair. They do sell in pairs. And entire sets that you could do a whole row of windows with can be in the hundreds of dollar ranges. There are some really beautiful designs beyond the patriotic that were done in that period of time as well. And so if you take a look, you can see that there's a whole collecting category of these. And I think that they're really cool and was happy to get these. I found them in Florida. They came in from the north, and I think that's probably where they'll go back. Next up for sale is this sign. This says Stetson, and you notice it's three-dimensional and it rises up off a flat surface. That's because this was a counter display for a store that would have sold hats and probably Western wear. It's made of Sirocco wood, which is a wood and glue composite, and this would have been done in the late 1950s because shortly thereafter Sirocco started making everything out of plastic. They were taken over by Burwood and became part of the Dart group, and those pieces were all injected molded plastic. But this is going to be right in that transition period around 1960. Stetson is an interesting company. The Stetson cowboy hat is made in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Not very Western at all, but there's a good reason for that, and that is that John Stetson, he was from New Jersey, and in his mid-30s he was sent to Colorado because he was having health problems, and they said that the dry climate would be helpful to him, and he went out west, found out it's very sunny and hot, and then sometimes very snowy and cold. And at first it was just sort of a joke. He took a bunch of fur and he was showing some other hunters and trappers in a group expedition how he could make a hat out of fur that would be waterproof and not require leather tanning. And so he made this big oversized hat with a big wide brim, kind of as a joke. But after he wore it a while, he realized it gave really good protection from the elements. So when he went back to the New Jersey area, he set up a manufacturing facility in Philadelphia, and he started making the Stetson hat, which became the quintessential cowboy hat because it indeed can hold water, at least if they were made the way the original ones were. And there were stories of cowboys whose canteens broke and they poured their water into their hat and carried it so they could survive. That became a popular early advertising for Stetson. The Boss of the Plains was the hat that evolved into the contemporary cowboy hat that we think of now. It was lightweight, it was waterproof, it had a wide brim for sun protection, and people really loved it. And so it's become a symbol of the Old West, even though it is made far from the Old West. I have not seen any of these dealer signs for sale. I've not encountered one before. I'm from out west originally. I would have thought I would see one there. I think they're actually rather hard to find. I like dealer plaques because of that. They typically made just a few of them for a particular dealer to sell, and they didn't make a whole bunch of stuff that was for public consumption because these weren't intended to be sold to the public. But if you're a Western person or a hat aficionado, this might be perfect, and I'm looking forward to seeing what the reaction in the marketplace is for this. I don't really have a sense for what it'll sell for because I can't find any comparables for anything like that at all. I know a Burwood sign that just said Burwood advertising Burwood plastics was sold recently for I think about $45. So that would be my estimate, but it could go for a lot more just because no one's seen it before. This very stylish bottle is of interest to me because I really do enjoy royalty commemoratives, and this is a good one because this is rather old. It's a true antique. This is from 1911. You can see the stopper is in the shape of a crown, and this is by Spode China. It does have the Spode mark, the Copeland Spode mark. Copeland was Spode's merchant friend who helped him set up his business. I believe Copeland was a tea merchant, and that's why so many of the tea wrappers were used for the early dinnerware patterns. But of course it was a big deal to make royalty commemoratives, and by 1911, really around the time of Queen Victoria's Jubilee in 1897, there was a large middle class in England who were able to afford and got interested in buying royalty commemoratives, even if they were commoners, and actually throughout the English Empire. And of course, she passed on in 1901. King Edward ascended to the throne. He was a lot older than most people when they ascend to the throne because Queen Victoria lived to be so elderly, and so he was only there for less than a decade. He passed on, and then his son George V became king. And this is the coronation of George V and Mary, who you see there. There's George V. And there's Queen Mary on the other side. Queen Mary is interesting to collectors. She was quite a collector herself. And that was a wonderful thing unless you were nobility in England, because if she came into your home and she saw something she liked, well, she said, gosh, I think that's really wonderful, and I think this should be something that is shown in the royal palace, which was a nice way of saying, you're going to give that to me because I'm the queen. So people who had nice collections were not actually fond of having her in their home. We've got the seal on the back here, and on the collar it says, on this one side it says that it is a premium from a Scotch distributor, so this would have been a Scotch bottle. On the other side it says it's for the coronation of George V and Queen Mary in 1911. So it's a rather handsome piece. The cork has either been replaced or shrunk over time, as often happens with corks. So it's not a tight fit. but there's no damage to this piece. It's in wonderful condition. One recently sold for $65 plus shipping, and I suspect that this should sell similarly. Royalty collectibles are not as valuable as they used to be, partly because the royal family has been having some trouble, but we're also looking at a matriarch who is very elderly herself now and has now achieved the longest reign in royal history. And when she's gone, I believe there will be a surge in interest in royalty commemoratives as a result. Now we're going to have some fun of a different sort. This is a belt. I'm going to move out of the way so you can see it a little better. This is a belt made of copper bands, and if you look inside, it has a mark for Renoir. The Renoir mark is on the back, right where my finger is pointing there on that little cube. These were made around 1960. Now, belts go way, way back in time. They go back to pretty much the dawn of civilization, and originally they were worn by men so that men could hang weapons and tools from them and carry them around. In medieval times, the lady of the house started to have purses and keys and things, and if they didn't hang them around their neck on a chatelaine, they would wear a belt and hang them from them. And so belts became something that women wore starting in around the 1000 AD period. However, in the 20th century, belts became very popular in starting the 1930s. That's why you see a lot of Bakelite buckles, because women started to be able to wear pants, particularly during the war years when it was more practical on some of the production lines. And so by the late 50s, when pants were starting to become stylish for women again, and particularly into the 60s and 70s, belts became very popular as fashion accessories. And this one is Renoir. It's made entirely of copper. The mesh front is a little different. Usually you see this particular model, which sells for about $100 usually when it comes up. Usually they just have a chain here, but this one has the mesh, so it's a little bit more of a look. And these are very popular now. Copper is really making a comeback in general. We see a lot of interest in copper kitchenware. We see it used as decorative items. People are loving the copper and brass wall art. And of course, Renoir was the company that made jewelry that eventually, when that shut down, they took that skill and technology and turned it into Curtis Jouret and started making those wall plaques shortly after this belt was done around 1960. So it's got a good history. I got it at an antique show recently for a pretty reasonable price because a lot of people are afraid of belts because of sizes, but this one fits a 32-inch waist, so it's not teeny tiny, and that makes a big difference. Some belts are so small that you can really only look at them rather than wear them. But this one is quite wearable. It's in great condition. It doesn't have scratches or blemishes, and I think it should do well, so we'll find out together. The next piece I want to show you I find rather interesting. I just got this one recently. I got a couple at an estate in Florida. I did not know about this artist until I bought them, but I thought that they were good, and it was clear to me that they were plate lithographs, meaning some sort of a copper plate was used to make the impression. You can see that because of the ridge here that was created, and I thought, well, they're good quality, and they're French. And it looked like they were a little bit comical and had to do with lawyers. So I purchased it and found out that actually this was a pretty interesting French artist named ROndelles, who lived from 1808 to 1879, and he was a printmaker, and he got really interested in depicting French political and social life. About the time that the Second Empire started in the 1830s, he became very concerned that the elite and the bourgeois had taken over from the common people again, and so he started to do prints and images that attacked political lives, church. He attacked the bourgeois, he attacked lawyers. This one is part of a series called Legends de Justice. I'm sure I'm massacring that, but these were done in the 1840s. He did 39 different themes. He was actually jailed in 1832 for a cartoon that he did that was offensive to King Louis Philippe, and was imprisoned for a short period of time. But he later ended up getting a commission from the French to do art. So times change and views changed, and eventually, while he was ignored in his time by the French public, a lot of artists were influenced by him, and he is now considered one of the great French artists of the 19th century. And I like this particular one. I don't speak French. I read a little bit about this, but basically this fellow is making an impassioned plea for his proletariat client, and the justices are essentially sleeping. So the commentary here is that justice is not being served because they're just not interested in serving those people, which is rather poignant from the time. It's a nice large size. It's never been in a frame. The condition is very good. It's on a nice sort of pulp paper. It's got the artist initials and signature. And these typically are worth about $75 to $100 each now, presented like this. So I'm hopeful that somebody will appreciate and understand the historic importance and the humor behind this, and also that the interest in the subject may be what motivates somebody to buy. Now next we just have a happy little bird, this toucan here, and what a great shape, what a great color. This is not an expensive piece. I don't always feature expensive things when I'm doing this because I'm more interested in the story and what it says about a particular maker or a time in history. And I thought this was a great example because this one has an interesting mark on the bottom. It looks very Art Deco, and I would say it probably is. Look at that great eye and the beak. But if you look at the mark on the bottom, it's got an eagle. We'll let that come in. There we go. There's the mark. And it is Aquincum. At least that's how I pronounce it. I suspect in Hungary, where it was made, they pronounce that a little bit different. But Aquincum is an ancient site in Budapest. It was a Roman provincial capital for a long time. And at one time it had 30,000 people. And even back in Roman times, it had a thriving pottery industry. The Huns sacked it, I think, around 400 AD, and so there's a lot of old Roman ruins there, and in them they found a lot of pottery shards and came to realize that because of its position along the river, that it was a great place to make ceramics and export them because they could send them down the river for shipping. And so it had been very important then, and this company formed in that area in Hungary, I believe in the 1930s, and produced until 1993. So they are no longer in production. It's not a mark that you see new pieces from like Herend or Zolnay or the other more commonly known Hungarian potteries. So I thought it was something worth showing because it's something that somebody might overlook, but look how cute it is. And I think they actually deserve not to be overlooked because they're so nicely done. I just think the color and the shape and design of this guy is great. He might sell for as little as $20 or as much as $40. He's about 5 inches long. I just think he's a lot of fun, and I was happy to be able to show him to you, and we will see what people out in eBay land think of him when we show him to them. Now, I mentioned that I was going to show you a Goebel piece that was not a Hummel figurine, and I have that right here. This is made of earthenware. Goebel does a lot of nice porcelains also, and have done since 1871, but in the 1930s they started making earthenware because it was less expensive, but also it was a little easier to shape into molds. And so this zebra, it's not just painted with stripes, although they are all hand painted, it's also ribbed. You can feel the ribbing and you can feel the texture on it. Zebras are an animal that people really like because they're high contrast and they're very cute and they jump out on a shelf, but not a lot of companies made zebra figures, so this one is a little more interesting. Now this mark, you'll notice, is Goebel with a stylized B. So notice how that B above the G there is in a little V, and the B is really not a full B, it's just a little, it looks almost like just a little V again above the big V, but that is a B. So that is the stylized B mark. This would be 1970s vintage. And I just think he's really cute. They had a lot of good designers besides Maria Innocentia Hummel. I don't know who the designer of this one is. It might have been Charlotte Beege, although she was mainly known for the redheads and other figural pieces. I'm not sure whether this guy was by her or if it was something done by someone else on the staff. I do know that he's really cute. Because he's a zebra, I expect he'll sell for $20 to $25. And he's just a little guy, about 4 or 5 inches tall, but very sweet and definitely collectible. I don't talk about it much because I've never had a collection of it, but this might be my favorite American dinnerware ever made. This is the ring pattern by Bauer Pottery of Los Angeles. And you can see concentric rings all the way down it. Bauer Pottery originally started out in Paducah, Kentucky, not far from where I am when I'm in Kentucky, but they moved to Los Angeles in the 1870s, I believe, pretty early, and by the late 20s, they saw that Catalina Island pottery was doing very well with solid color pieces, so they developed a colorware line and decided, because the Depression had hit, that they needed to do more than just sanitary tile and sewer tile and planters, that they needed to start doing tableware as well so that they had more items to sell. This is a cookie jar. The ring pattern came out around 1932. This is one of the original colors. It was called Chinese yellow. These glazes were done by a fellow named Victor Hauser. He did all of the really nice colorways for Bauer over the years, and after he was done with Bauer, when they went out of business in 1962, he eventually ended up doing the glazes for Jaru pottery. If you saw last month's bonus video, you'll notice that I had a piece of Jaru and he did the metallic glaze for that. So he was very accomplished with the glazes. This one just says Bauer. Now if it said Bauer 2000, that is a revival. Somebody bought the name. They're doing similar looking pieces to the old ringware, but they're a little different. Colors are a little different. They're made in San Bernardino rather than LA, and they are not quite the same. This is the original from the 1930s, and that's the reason why this piece should sell for somewhere in the neighborhood of $100. When Art Deco collecting first started to become really big in the early 1980s, this piece would have sold for close to $200. So if you're interested in Art Deco ceramics, this is a good time to get into this sort of thing. A lot of the old collections are coming onto the market again. We're starting to see these pieces be available again. This one is absolutely immaculate. No chips, no cracks. It rings like a bell when you take the lid off, so no one can steal your cookies because you'll hear them. Next up, these are always a favorite every time I show them, and I wanted to show this one and put it out. I've had it at a few shows, and I've had so many nice purses that people ooh and ah, and then they've bought other ones, so I thought I should make this available to the online community. This is by Whiting and Davis, and it's a lovely mesh purse with a great geometric deco pattern. It's one of their more geometric and more Art Deco pieces, so it's going to be late 1920s. You can see the Whiting and Davis mark on the inside of the frame here. Important thing to do when you look at these is to look at the edges and make sure that where the hinge is, of course they didn't knit everything up to the edge there because they had to have some flexibility for the hinge. But if you start to see big holes down the side, then you know the piece has actually been damaged. So that's important to look for if you're buying these. This one is in good condition. The paint is clean. There's a little bit of wear to the frame because somebody liked it enough to use it some, but they were very careful with it. The flappers loved these. And there were some really good designers involved. Elsa Schiaparelli designed some of the 1920s Whiting and Davis mesh bags. So did Poirot, is the one who really introduced Middle Eastern styles into fashion. He ended the trend of corseting for women and really modernized fashion. So you can thank him for the fact that you don't have to wear a painful corset that cuts off your breathing and circulation. That was a nice thing that he did for the fashion world. I also like this piece because it has an interesting heritage in that these sorts of mesh purses started to become really popular in the late Victorian era. They were plain then, a lot of them were just German steel mesh, But the reason they became popular is because medieval fashion came back into style, and so they looked like chainmail. Well, then that evolved into using screen printing to do these really fabulous designs on them, and so that's why in the Art Deco period you have this wonderful legacy of all of these great bags. Whiting and Davis is still in business. Their companies like Mandalian are long gone, but Whiting was so great, and they've managed to stay popular by getting celebrities to get interested in these, and every generation they get someone new interested who then popularizes it with a new group of people. So I don't know that these will ever go out of style. They are good sellers. This should sell for 100 or maybe more, especially because it does have the Art Deco design. And I'm looking forward to putting this online so that we can all see how it does. Now next up, like I said, I didn't bring everything expensive and refined. I brought some things that were fun because the item or the people behind them are interesting, and I think this guy is interesting. Let me show you up close. This is an original pin for Elvis Costello and the Attractions. Elvis Costello was born Declan Patrick McManus in London. His dad was a jazz trumpeter and singer, and so he took after him. He even sang with him in a commercial before he got famous. But Elvis Costello, as he called himself, was part of the punk and new wave movement in London in the late 1970s, and he really wanted to buck some trends. His first couple of albums did well in England, but he couldn't get CBS Records to release them in the US. So at one point he was even arrested for busking outside of the CBS headquarters in London, where he was trying to sell direct to people because he wanted to get attention in the United States. He eventually did so. The Attractions were the band he formed after his first album had success in England, and their second album with the Attractions on them, his backup band, was a big hit in the United States, partly because of the song Pump It Up, which was a big hit for him. He danced sideways on his ankles in that, and he had big oversized glasses. He's a little bit bug-eyed. He was really herky-jerky in the video, and it really looked different than the way most bands and most people were acting and dancing and looking at that time. So he really made an impression on people. And he also made an impression because at the end of 1977, the Sex Pistols were supposed to be on Saturday Night Live, and they did not show up because they're the Sex Pistols, of course, so there are always problems getting them to do anything. So his band was called in as backup, and NBC said, you can do any song you want other than Radio Radio, because Radio Radio had a bunch of lyrics about how the radio stations were being taken over by big companies and turned into crass commercialism, and that there was no authenticity to it. So NBC said you can't sing that on the show. So they got on the show and they started singing their hit from the year before, and about a verse into it he said stop, 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 and he started the band again, and they sang Radio Radio, and he was banned from being on NBC for 10 years after that because of that, but he got a reputation for being a rebel, and because of that his album took off in America and he became very popular. So I just like his story. I think it's cool to see an old pin from the era. You know, this is something that'll probably sell between $10 and $20, but if you look in people's old jewelry drawers from back in the day when they were punk rockers or rockers of any sort, you will find old pins that are actually worth some money. I sold a Devo Flash View pin for I think $20 at a show recently. So there is a collector market for these, and they were just little things that, again, the punks, like the hippies, didn't really keep stuff. That wasn't their ethos. So finding these is not that easy, actually. So it'll be fun to see who gets that. Now we're going to a more graceful, genteel time, a little over 100 years ago. These are true antiques now, and this is a Wallace nutting print. And you will see a signature that says Wallace nutting right here. If you saw another Wallace nutting print, you would probably say a similar signature, but it might not look the same as this signature. And the reason for that is that Wallace nutting started off as a photographer in New England, and he really was wistful for the colonial era, and he saw a lot of the old colonial homes and buildings being torn down and replaced by modern skyscrapers. And just like a lot of people who are antique and vintage people, and he was an antique collector back then, he wanted to do something to help preserve the old stuff. So he started taking all of these pictures of bucolic scenes, colonial furniture, women dressed in colonial dress. This particular one is one of his scenic ones. These originally were done starting in 1904. He started the Wallace Nutting Art Print Studio. In 1912, he expanded and he published a catalog, and by then he had 900 different images. At one time, he had 200 colorists working for him. They would turn the photography into prints and books, and then the colorists would hand tint each one of these by hand. So all the coloring was added by hand to these prints, and then the colorist would sign the piece. That's why the signatures are not the same necessarily from one Wallace Nutting print to the next. They were very collectible at the time. They ran anywhere from $1.25 to $20 back in the 19-teens and 20s, and they really kicked off interest in preservation of colonial America. So he really did the antique world a big favor. He eventually published the most important book on Windsor-style colonial furniture in the antique realm, and to this day it's still pretty much the go-to guide for information about Windsor furniture from the colonial era in America. So he was very influential in his time. These became very popular to collect about 40 years ago, and then they sort of fell from favor. So the value on this one is probably only going to be somewhere in the $25 to $30 area, which I think is pretty remarkable considering the handwork that went into this. This is another thing that I think is a good thing to collect now if you like it, because I do believe that the prices will go back up. We are seeing more people starting to get interested in traditional design and styles again, and this definitely is part of that. Now, I know a lot of my viewers really like costume jewelry, and so do I, so I wanted to bring this very pretty piece. If you saw my recent video from the West Palm Beach Antique Show, you'll actually see where I bought this piece from a dealer at the Extravaganza. It is by DeLizza and Elster, which is also known by some of their trade names, including Juliana. Juliana was only used for about 2 years, and they just had paper hang tags, so you don't see a Juliana mark on any of this. They also sold under the names Gloria and Terra, but they also produced for Kenneth J. Lane and Weiss and a lot of other companies. They were in business until the 1990s in Rhode Island, which was the center of costume jewelry making in this country, although there were regional brands all over the country. This one's really nice because it's clear, but it's Aurora Borealis, so it has this nice carnival sheen to it. It's just a very happy look. It's something that can be worn with a casual outfit or something very formal as a result, and I love that it's got these dingle-dangles. That's the official term. And I just think that they're very pretty. You can always tell these, even though they're not marked, with the bracelets, if it's this type of a snap bracelet, because they have a box snap. That's this here. See how it's a box when it folds over. And because they used 5 oval links in the construction of their bracelets. So those are clues that let you know, even if it doesn't have a mark, which they almost never do have a paper tag left, that this is one of the things that people call Juliana now. It was good quality, and part of the reason you know that is because even though it was just costume jewelry, here's a safety chain. So they knew that you were paying a little bit more for this, and they didn't want it to fall off. So it's well made. They're just beautiful. It's very saleable. This should probably go somewhere between $75 and $85. Next up, we have a Telechron clock. And this one's got a great look to it. I just love the fact that it's this clear bubble and then a clear ring. So you have this break where if you put it against the wall like this, you're just going to see this ring of numbers, and then it seems like the clock is almost floating in space. This was part of General Electric's Telechron division, and this was called the designer line. They came up with the designer line in 1954 because Up until then, clocks were becoming so plain and simple that they really just almost had no style at all. And modern living in the 1950s, yes, was about simplicity, but people wanted a little bit of style with their things. And so a lot of designers did start looking for ways to make things spice up. The funny thing is that I got this from someone who insisted that this was a Russell Wright design, but in reality, the designer line, as they called it, was not designed by any major designer who we can trace today. They did not actually employ any of the important designers of the day to do this. They just got designers who were good and figured it out on their own, but did not get any credit for it. It works great. It has no cracks or breaks. It's got the turn knob here, so everything is the way it's supposed to be. You notice I have it at 10 minutes to 10. That's what they refer to as happy time. If you ever notice, if you go into a clock shop, there aren't many clock shops left these days, but if you go into one, they usually will set the hands to 10:10 because there's a superstition that that's like a smile. Everything goes up. And so that is the reason that they would do that. It's an old superstition amongst clock people. Cord is good, it works, it's a neat looking piece. It's probably worth somewhere in the $45 to $50 range. And I'm curious to see what people think of it. I'm also curious to see whether anyone else tries to tell me that it was by Russell Wright. Russell Wright did design clocks in the 1950s, but the ones that I've seen that were designed by him were done using Harkerware dishes as the background. And so you will see Harkerware made into clocks that were designed by Russell Wright, but not these plastic ones. Okay, our penultimate item of this video is this very interesting piece here hanging on a strap with a wonderful raw turquoise. And if you notice the color of the turquoise, that plus the design tell us that this is from Central Asia. And in fact, this is Tibetan. And these are known, at least I've always known them as Gao boxes, G-A-U or G-H-A-U. And the purpose of these were to be carried with you. Now, generally I see them as amulets, but this one has a big strap on it. But they were to be carried with you because inside, and it was removed, of course, because the person who had this took out the blessing to keep for themselves. But generally they would have things that you needed for a prayer ritual, or sometimes it would have fluff and something to start a flame, although those flame bags usually look a little different than these. But they would often have a Buddhist amulet in there or a prayer written on paper, and it was something considered very important to have with you for your prayer ceremony. The person that I got this from had gotten it in Tibet, back when you could still go to Tibet, relatively easy, but it had been taken over by China, so this is sometime around the 1960s that they purchased it. And they said that the people there were desperately trying to sell things for money because they were so desperately poor, which is a very sad thing. But that's why we get to enjoy it now and see it. It's very deeply designed. I think the designs are really beautiful. And these are pretty collectible and fairly valuable. The typical selling prices for items like this generally are in the range of $150 to $200. And I am expecting that we will get something in that range for this particular piece. Now, if anyone out there is Buddhist or knows a little bit more about these, I'd be very curious to get more information. It's something that you can get cursory information about, but I do believe that if you were Buddhist, you would actually understand the significance a little bit more than what you can just get out of searching online and researching. So if anyone out there has more information, I would be very interested to know your impressions of this piece. And you can leave a comment. And for the rest of us, we will put it online and we will see how it does and see what people's reaction to it is there. Now, we had one more item for this month, and I am traveling, and that item has disappeared. So that means we are on number 19, and this month, number 19 is our last item. And it's very handsome and a little bit heavy, so let me get it. Okay. This is a wonderfully shaped, wonderfully sculpted eagle sculpture. This is bronze with silver and gold paint. It's on a marble pedestal, and it is by someone who is known specifically for doing sculpture of bald eagle. I'm going to step out of the way so I can get closer to the camera and show you, because it is heavy and I don't wish to drop it or damage it, and I want you to be able to really see it. This is by an Idaho artist named Mike Curtis, who started doing these castings in 1971. He lives in Idaho, where he sees the bald eagles fishing and perching, and he lives out in a rural area where he can actually study these birds very closely. And that's why the sculpting is so realistic on this. Very, very good detail of all the feathers, the head, the neck, the eyes. It's very intense, actually. Bald eagles are raptors, after all, and they are a very intense bird. And I think this one is really done well. This one dates to 1993, so it is just within the era of what I consider vintage. He's not doing this particular one anymore. This one was number 25 out of an edition of 150. There will not be more of these. You can see the signature there. It's important on bronzes to look for signatures, whether they're new or old, because it is a great place to at least start in terms of valuation. And the values on these particular bronzes are rather high. He's rather sought after. They had him make a piece for Gerald Ford on his retirement. He's been exhibited at the Audubon Art Exhibit in Alaska. He's been exhibited at the National Sculpture Society in New York. He's been exhibited all over the place because obviously the work is very good. The base is actually rather substantial as well, and that is why it's called American Spirit, by the way. They made a label on the bottom so that you would know, because it doesn't say that in the casting. And that is why this piece could sell for as much as $500 to $600. We're not going to start it as high as that, but we have seen comparable sales in that realm. So we will see what the reaction is, but eagles are an extremely popular design, and particularly right now. I think in an uncertain world, people really look for stability, people look to express patriotism, and that's why we have a lot of people interested in the eagle as a form. And it really is quite handsome. I'll pull back so that you can see the whole thing. So it's a wonderful piece. I think someone will be very happy to get it. I actually pulled it out of a show because I had someone interested, and I thought I really want to share this with my viewers. So they came back and said, oh, I was prepared to pay $400 for it. And I said, well, I'm afraid that it's gone away already. So it has flown to you to see first, and then we're going to put it on eBay, and everyone will have a chance at it from there. So again, if you are interested in seeing how these items do online at auction, please go to the Antique Nomad on eBay or follow the links in the description here. You'll be able to click in and see how any or all of these items are faring in the marketplace. I really enjoy bringing this to you. I'm glad that all of my subscribers get to see these videos eventually, and I'm glad to be able to present them to my level 2 members first. Thank you so much for sponsoring this, and thank you all for watching. Please do like and comment on this video, and let us know what you would like to see, because I do pick out typically 20 items every month and show them and list them live while the people are watching this video. So it's a great way for us to all learn what the market is like at a given point in time and a snapshot of where things are trending. I am George the Antique Nomad. It's great to be with you. Please check me out at the social media links in the description, and we will have more videos and lots more fun from the world of antiques and vintage for you soon. Thanks so much, and bye for now. Thanks for joining me again in the fun and fascinating antique community here, where online meets the real world. Please click the subscribe button below, click the bell to be notified when new videos upload, leave a comment below, and hit thumbs up to like this video. Links to our online social media and our items for sale are in the description. This is George at the Antique Nomad. Bye for now.